I'm here with Bronson Irwin, who I remember as a dominant right tackle at Oklahoma, helped OU win that Sugar Bowl against Alabama, where we got to see Sugar Bowl Trevor Knight. And I remember being at that game, covering that game, and Bronson was so excited. One of my favorite memories of you, dude, is coming down on the field. You guys are celebrating, and we're all trying to wrangle some player to get a quote from, right? Because you guys are doing your thing. But you're like, nah, you can ask me anything. I'm done. I am out of here. What do you want to know? That was my favorite Bronson Irwin memory, because it seemed like for the most part, you know, while you were at Oklahoma, you tried to answer questions, but you were also not necessarily trying to give something away. What was your mindset like as an offensive lineman, especially as a junior and a senior on those teams?
Yeah, you know, I think when it comes to the media, we are trained to give away certain information and obviously to hold back on certain things. So yeah, when that time comes when you're done, you know, it kind of feels like the chains are off a little bit. You can kind of speak freely, but no, those last 2 years were really a great time. Obviously, the exclamation point there at the end with the Sugar Bowl win against a really good Alabama team was a high point. You know, the bowl game the year before, maybe a low point at that point in time. Really a rough game against Johnny Manziel. Obviously a great player, but we just couldn't get it going that particular day. But no, I mean, great memories there at the University of Oklahoma, and you know, obviously I feel like had a great career and played in a lot of really big and meaningful games and won most of them.
And it's interesting you bring up the parallels between 2012 and 2013. I remember quarterbacks being the storylines for all of those years. I say for all of those years because Johnny Football was one thing, but people forget that's the same year that Tavon Austin went to work on the defense. I wonder, as an offensive lineman, what is your mindset when you're seeing the defense just give it up like that and you're going, okay, we're going back out here to try to win this again?
Yeah, you know, I think more so than most positions, I think offensive line are really, you know, creatures of monotony. So every drive, every game, every week, every day of the week is approached a certain way. And, you know, typically we do the same thing on Mondays throughout the whole season, Tuesdays, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, when you see defense struggling a little bit, obviously it's imperative that you go out there and do a good job and score points, you know, to ultimately to keep up. And it was an interesting game that sometimes I forget about, but definitely a cool environment to play in there in Morgantown. But yeah, he had a day and put him at running back, and you know, we had safeties in the box, and it was an interesting interesting night. But you know, never really, you know, when you play at Oklahoma and when you're you know, you're a solid unit up front, you don't ever really feel like you're going to lose. You'll never really feel doubt in those game type scenarios. You know, there's always a way to go out there and win the football game, and that's ultimately what we're going after.
Right, and you got W's against West Virginia, obviously Sugar Bowl. Johnny Football did we did at AT&T Stadium. I remember being there for that game too. I mean, just awesome games for totally different reasons. But again, being an offensive lineman, I think Landry Jones was the quarterback the year before, right? And then there's the quarterback battle that ends up with Trevor Knight. You see a lot of Blake Bell. You see some Kendal Thompson. You end the season with Trevor Knight running a lot of zone read stuff when you're running a lot more air raid, Josh Heupel, Landry Jones stuff the year before. Is there something that changes for you? Are you ever wondering, what are we doing and why are we doing it?
No, I think that's, you know, growing up, you know, playing this sport for most of my life, you know, you kind of deal with the personnel that you have. And, you know, obviously the higher you go and, you know, from high school or middle school to high school to college and beyond, I think that just becomes a bigger piece of it, is just being able to adjust. And, you know, there's game plans for every week. And I mean, we put in a totally different game plan for the Sugar Bowl my senior year with Heupel, and he just did an excellent job getting us ready for that game. We watched a lot of tape of teams that were able to do some positive things against them, like Auburn, for example. That year was I think the big the kick six game where they returned the field goal and won the game. But we really put that whole offense together during bowl practices and leading up to the bowl game. But that's not unheard of. That's just what it takes at this league. That's what it takes to play at a high level. And I think that's really kind of become the norm. Ultimately you want to do what you do, but at the end of the day, you've got to realize, sometimes you're playing a team that has certain strengths and weaknesses that, you might want to kind of adjust and try to put yourself in a more advantageous situation.
Yeah, I hear you saying that from a schematic standpoint and from a drawing it up on the board standpoint, but Landon Collins was a missile in that game. I think C.J. Mosley was still playing middle linebacker, and I might have it wrong that Raekwon Davis was there. I'm trying to put it all together. But I just remember there were some dudes that were going to be drafted in the first and second round playing on that defense, and it's one thing to say, yeah, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it. It's another thing to go out and execute it, especially, again, with the way that Trevor had been up and down all year. There's a reason why we, and by we, I mean folks outside the program, nicknamed Sugar Bowl Trevor Knight, because we'd not seen that guy. That guy, I don't even think we'd seen him all year, because there was the TCU game, the Katy Perry game. There was also Kansas State, where it just looked like him and Brennan Clay having a good day. And then there was that, where it's like, wait a second, did this dude just throw for 300 yards and 3 TDs? Did that happen?
Yeah, I think the Katy Perry game was the next year. I don't think I was there for those shenanigans.
Okay. All right.
Thankfully,
there you go.
I would have had to shut that down.
No,
somehow.
What did you think when that happened?
It just seemed like a real squandered opportunity, and that was, 2014 Katy Perry, not 2019 Katy Perry. I think there's a distinct difference.
Wow.
I might have played that a little differently if I'm Trevor, but you win some and lose some. I think he's done well in that area for himself. So, you mentioned the different quarterbacks, and going back to that Oklahoma State game in 13, all three of those guys played at one point during that game, and that's kind of the mentality is who can get it done, and that's who's going to play, and doesn't really change what we're doing up front. Doesn't really change the game plan necessarily. I mean, that wasn't the expectation going into that game, was to play three quarterbacks. The expectation, I think, was for Trevor to be the guy, and I can't remember, he had some type of small injury, but you do what you do, and there's really no time to sit there and feel bad for yourself or ponder what if. You just make a decision and you roll with it, and you do the best with what you can. I mean, we had a lot of injuries there at the end of the year also that we were dealing with up front that, ultimately put me at tackle in the Sugar Bowl. And, I had a young guy playing left tackle in the Oklahoma State game due to an injury that we sustained in the K-State game. It's just part of the game.
Most of the year, right?
Yeah, I pretty much played guard most of my career. Had a few snaps at tackle before that, but, Bill came to me before the Sugar Bowl after the Oklahoma State game, and the guy that had to step in there for that game was a little rough, and the competition wasn't getting any lighter, and asked me if that was something I was comfortable with doing, and I said absolutely. Something that I had total confidence that I could do, and again, it doesn't really change anything as far as preparation, but I remember in the media, when the media was out there for bowl practices in New Orleans, we'd line up like with guys all in different positions so nobody could tell who was playing what position, because you know how you guys like to leak stuff if you can and get your name out there a little bit. But so we'd be out there, and I'd be at center, and Gabe would be at guard, and Ty Darlington would be at tackle, and just like all kinds of crazy stuff, just to try to throw people off. And obviously I think it was kept pretty under wraps until the warm-ups of the game. So I think we did a good job.
No, you did an absolutely great job, because again, that I always tell folks, the people that are covering Oklahoma or Texas or your favorite team for the most part, like a blue blood, are very good at their jobs, right? You say, you like the league stuff, but that's part of the gig, right? The gig is news, right? And the understanding on that side of the ball is also, hey, they're good at their jobs. Let's not make it easy, right? And I understand that, and I respect that. I'm bringing that up because the level of gamesmanship in college football, I think, has shifted from we're trying to hide what we're doing from the other team to we're trying to hide what we're doing from the people who cover us every single day, because they'll notice. Because, for instance, this year, USC has had open practices. Think about that. They've had open practices to the public, not just the media, to the public. Whereas at the University of Oklahoma, University of Alabama, you're going to see what we show you and what we say you can see. You're going to talk to who we say you can talk to in the manner we say you can talk to them, which is okay, which is fine. I'm just bringing that up to say that's where you have to be if you're competing for a college football playoff spot or you're competing for titles, whereas USC, that dude is going to get fired if they don't turn around in a big way this year. And I've always been fascinated by that aspect of it. Obviously, this is running on a YouTube channel and in a podcast form, but also just to the idea that the kids are in on it too, right? That you would know, hey, we're going to move you guys around, if for no other reason but to not let those guys over there with tape recorders and cameras know this is what we're doing.
Oh, yeah, then, all the way up to the game, you just compliment the other guys. And, Alabama's so good. I don't know how we're going to beat them. And, we might as well just forfeit the game and let them have it and, just have a good time in New Orleans. And, we're just happy to be here and, really hope that we're able to go out there and be competitive. And it's like, that's not what we really think. The expectation is to win every football game you play. When you're at a school, like you said, a blue blood, there's no, let's just keep it close. See if we can try to, cover the spread in this game. No, we're trying to get W's every time we go out there. But, yeah, I mean, we like to have fun with it too. I mean, if you don't think that there's, fake call sheets getting dropped out there on the visitor sideline before the game, and,
wait,
crazy.
Still?
I mean, it goes through it. Well, why not?
No, I mean, okay, so there's the story of Gundy and Leach doing it to Texas way back early in Bob's career. I want to say it was around 99. But while you were there, that was still that sort of gamesmanship?
Oh, I mean, I think that the people at that level are going to do whatever they can to get an edge. And I think if that's something that's maybe it's not a play sheet, maybe it's a wristband. Right. You drop a wristband. I know I scooped a wristband one time before one game and submitted it as evidence to whatever coordinator. I think it was an offensive wristband, so I gave it to DC and said, hey, do with this as you may. But who knows? That's the thing, is you don't know if it's real information or not. It's just so much that goes into a football game. I think people sit down and they see 60 minutes of football, but I mean this is a year-round progression that leads up to months and months and months and really years of your life of work, lead up to this 60-minute block of time that the margin of error is so small. So anything you can do to gain an advantage is going to be something that you at least explore.
So in that year-round progression, that 365 of football, we're in April. We're a week away from the spring game. What is the mindset of a player like yourself who junior year, senior year, you're pretty sure you're going to play, if not start? Are you just trying to make sure you get through these 15 practices unscathed? Are you trying to get the most out of what you're doing? Are there still things that you personally are trying to accomplish in spring ball? Because I feel like myself, speaking for me, I can't get excited about spring ball anymore, man. I can't. There's so much that goes on today that won't necessarily matter at all in August. And by August, we're talking about playing football at the highest level in front of fans, on television, for wins and losses. But this time of year, I'm not always sure we're paying attention to the things that we should be.
You're not fired up for the Lee Bryce concert?
Oh, God. All right, so if we get into this, we need to get into this because, my goodness, I personally could care less about Lee Bryce. That is not to say that I could care less about Sarah Evans. It is not to say I can't care less about Danielle Peck. It's not to say I couldn't care less about if you could swing Garth Brooks, Jason Isbell. I can keep going here. My point there is, if you see Lee Bryce on the flyer and you're a kid coming to this game on an official visit, what are you going to think? And I ask kids about it, and we kind of sort of line up. Now, we understand that the concert is not for them. They won't see it. It ain't on their itinerary, right? It's like it never happened. But I also am a fan of the team. I like the team, right? I would like to see a concert that speaks to me. It doesn't. I understand I'm in the minority there. But I look at Kansas, and I get that Kansas needs the publicity in a way that Oklahoma does not. But Rick Ross versus Lee Bryce, there's some people that are going to love that. There's some people that are going to hate that. I think there's room for both.
Yeah, think about the backlash on the other end though.
Okay.
For Becky and Steve, that have season tickets since '04, and they want to go down there and have their margs and go catch a little Jimmy Buffett type concert. What are they thinking?
No, and you make a good point, right? And I guess where I'm sitting is my channel. I was asking the questions. People told me what they thought, and I respect that. I get that. I understand that my opinion on this is not everybody's opinion on this. And I also understand that Becky and Steve deserve every bit of an opportunity to see their Margaritaville if they want to, right? I just thought it was something that would be stupid not to bring up. You know what I mean? Because they put so much into it.
So I would approach that from purely a recruiting perspective as a missed opportunity.
Okay.
I think that if we're recruiting, say 16 to 18-year-old high school kids, the most popular musical genre in that space and that demographic is going to be hip hop. I like hip hop. I'm sure you like hip hop. Younger people generally tend to like that style of music. So if you're looking at it from a recruiting perspective, anything outside of that space is going to be a miss, right? And granted, like you said, that's not even part of their deal. This is something that's definitely aimed towards the fans. But I mean, even if you could kind of parlay that into some more of a pop type of act, like I don't even know. I'm not a pop music guy, but it's just something that speaks to younger individuals. Lee Brice is a talented guy for sure. But I think if you're looking at it from a recruiting perspective, there's a whole different way you could go with it. Now, with that comes criticism from the fans, people really dissecting lyrics if it's from a rapper, and you get in a situation with Cardi B and all the stuff she's got going on. I mean, there's a certain side of it I see as avoiding some of that potential issue. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking at it from a recruiting perspective, it's definitely going to fall a little bit short. From a fan perspective, if it gets more people in the door, I get it from that area. Same as last year. I mean, Trace Atkins, who's dying to see that guy. You can go catch him at the casino in Grant, Oklahoma or whatever. But I mean, it's definitely targeted toward the demographic of our fan base, which is going to be middle-aged to older, suburbia, basically, I would say, for the most part.
Right, and I understand all of that, right? Because when I talk to kids, the thing that they're going to take away from the official visit to a spring game is, how was I treated? What are the facilities like? What do my parents think, and how many people showed up to watch these dudes go through a glorified practice? I mean, they know what time it is. They're not stupid about whether or not they're going to see a game. But seeing 52,000 people last year made a dent, right? And if you can attribute that record-breaking attendance to Trace Atkins, cool. Up the ante, go get a Bryce, go get a better version of a Trace Atkins concert because it worked for you last year. I get that from a business and marketing and recruiting angle of, hey, the kids want to see people in the stands. They don't necessarily care that the concert goes on. I think that's a very good point.
So why not have a act like that before a Lee Brice, a Trace Atkins, somebody in that general area, then have the game, and then have a different act after the game that's maybe a lower tier hip hop type act, or a DJ, or something in that effect, that from the game it kind of has like kind of a party atmosphere after the fact, or something of that nature. I don't know. I'm just spitballing.
Well, I mean, if you can get Joe C to open up his pocket for both of those, and by his pocket I mean the athletic department, I think that's a win all the way around. I just don't necessarily think that at the end of the day, the University of Oklahoma athletic department is in the business of scheduling concerts, right? They made the decision to go get one, I think in large part because of who the head coach is. Because could you see Bob doing something like that?
Well, I think my first year out, they had a band, like a local band, that played like during the breaks of the game, and then they had a DJ, and it wasn't fluent. For sure, but I don't know. I think that I don't know. They've picked the conservative route. I get that.
Right.
I understand why.
Right.
But from a recruiting perspective, I think you're leaving something on the table when, if I'm in a close recruiting scenario with my A, my B, and my C, and two of those spring games are on the same day, and one of them's got Trace Atkins, and one of them's got the Migos. That might sway me a little bit. Is that scenario common? Maybe not. I don't know.
But I think it will be.
I get it. It's going to become more prevalent for sure. It's going to become more of a production, just like recruiting is becoming more of a big showcase with Twitter and all these schools are adding graphic designers to their staffs, and they're making their pace. Back in my day, they just crudely pasted your face on someone else's body.
I remember.
And the skin tone may not even match. You know what I'm saying?
I remember.
It's like,
but also a lot of that was dudes just, fans thinking that they're recruiting, right? And they're doing it. They weren't even I think one of the coolest things about watching OU from a recruiting branding perspective digitally is that it's the best at what it does. Heffley and those guys, I make it my business to know these things and to go check out what other people are doing. And the fact of the matter is, since Riley came on, since Heffley came on, since Hansen came on, the way that they recruit digitally is unmatched. And I think that's very, very cool, because it used to be, somebody would paste your skull over the top of, I don't know, for the sake of argument, let's say Darrell Williams. And you'd be like, cool, nice jersey. But it would be something, right? As opposed to now, we're walking into record stores and pulling out vinyl. Like, come on. Who else does that?
Yeah. Those kids don't even know what vinyl is.
Well, no. Vinyl's coming back for them. Like, I got hit over the head with this. I was wrong. They dig on it.
I think for a certain demographic, nobody's scratching the disc, and I think that's kind of a hipster thing.
Yes.
I think that your 16-year-old jock from DFW is probably not heavy into vinyl. Now, if they're recruiting like Kerry Murdoch, he would love it, But your normal 16-year-old guy doesn't have a vinyl collection that he sits down with a glass of Gatorade and listens to on a Friday night, But I think that the vinyl, it's a cool little story. It gives it where everyone's kind of got their own little niche in there, but they definitely have made leaps and bounds in that space. But thinking back to the later part of my experience there, like, they were late getting to that side of it, really. And I don't know if that was stubbornness or thinking that we're Oklahoma, we don't necessarily need to do all this digital stuff, and now it's a necessity at this point. So I'm glad that they really ramped it up, and got guys on staff that are doing it the right way, and does it make a difference? I don't know. For me, it wouldn't have personally. I would much rather get a handwritten note from somebody. That speaks a lot more to me. But I actually found a letter from Coach Bedenbaugh when he was in Arizona when I was in high school. It was a handwritten letter. I found it a couple weeks ago. But I'm kind of old school.
What do you say?
Oh, I don't remember exactly. It was kind of your typical, good talking to you on the phone the other day, and looking forward to getting to know you, and hopefully getting you to come out here for a visit, or whatever. That was the big thing back in the day, was you just got so much mail. My parents kind of moved a couple times over the last year or two, and they found this big, like 60-gallon plastic thing that's just full of mail. And that can't be efficient. So from that perspective, it's a lot easier to blast out tweets and get it to them in 10 seconds versus sending out snail mail. But
they still do that too. They still do that.
Yeah,
too.
They got to do that. There's something to be said for a handwritten deal that somebody signed that's on a cool little card that's got the logo on there or whatever. But maybe I'm just old school. But I get both sides of it for sure.
No, and I think you also hit on something that I kind of wanted to use to segue into. I imagine Bill Bedenbaugh writing you a handwritten note with a dip in his lip, spitting every, I don't know, 3 sentences as he goes. And
there might have been some spit on it. Yeah.
right. You know what I mean? But like the dude will, at least in interviews, right? In interviews, he's not pulling any punches. He's going to tell you what he thinks. Sometimes he'll even laugh at you as you ask him about some dude that just ain't cutting it, right? And you're there at the inflection point of the end of the Kittle, Bobby Jack Wright era of two dudes coaching the offensive line, essentially, with Kittle, I think, still coaching the tackles. And then Bedenbaugh comes in with an entirely different way of doing things, notably to us that you guys were going to get a lot heavier, and there was going to be this emphasis on being physical, and we're going, wait a second. One, aren't they already physical? And two, does he know that this is an air raid that they run? And he's like, nah, I got it, whatever. What did you get from all of that when he first came in? What was the temperature like?
I think, first of all, being heavier, I think you heard kind of a general exhale of, oh, thank goodness. I don't have to worry about cutting weight for Coach Schmidt anymore as much. At the end of the day, if you're 310, 320, 10, 15 pounds that's like a 1 day swing of weight. Or one practice, you can lose 10 pounds pretty easily. I think the physicality is something that he preaches, as just as part of the gig. Sometimes with other coaches that I've seen, you've got physical guys, you got guys that are a little bit more finesse, you've got guys that are more cerebral, and maybe a center or something of that nature. So you kind of have different styles of guys that play across the board. For him, physicality is aside from knowing your job and executing is up there, and he doesn't waver from that. I remember when he first got there, so I guess it would have been spring of 13. So he got there in January or February of my senior year, and we went out there for practice and didn't really know exactly what to expect, but he put us through an individual period, which, obviously O-line down there by themselves working on drills. And we were shocked. Like, this is brutal. How are we going to do this? Are we going to do this every single day? Yep. This is every day. Every single day we'll do this. And then you go through spring, and then, that was insane that we did that every day. August rolls around. Oh, sure. I mean, we're doing 2 practices today. We can't do this stuff twice today. No, every single day. I mean, rapid fire. He'd take half the line and go with the GA. Half the line would stay with him so he could get more reps. Or centers and guards would stay with the GA, and he'd take the tackles, or vice versa.
What do you have you doing?
And he would just the normal drills, double team drills, different med ball punch drills, hip explosion stuff. I mean, the normal stuff that you would do.
Right.
He just found a way to maximize it so you did as many reps as possible every single day. And being able to do, say one guy takes the right side, one guy takes the left side, you can double your reps and get more work that way. But, it's funny, a couple weeks, maybe the first week of fall camp was kind of getting used to it. Now it was like, that's just what we do. It's what we do every day. Mm-hmm. This is how it works. And, from the outside looking in, it's like, man, that's a pretty hardcore individual period that, and that usually leads right up to inside run period or a team session. So that's, you're not rested up for those team sessions. You're already drenched in sweat and ready to go. But that's just his mentality. If we're going to work hard, if we're down there, we're going to utilize our time efficiently, and you're going to learn something. And more than likely, it's going to be with muscle memory, because you're going to be so gassed out that when it comes to the fourth quarter, you're gonna know what to do, and you're just going to do it by habit.
Okay, so that's the way it's supposed to work, right? That is for lack of a better term, no shade to anybody, just what I got in my head, the rosier way to look at it. Surely there's somebody there, because there's always somebody on every team that says, in some fashion, whether it's body language or physically, don't know that you would confront Bill Bedenbaugh on most anything, but perhaps there's somebody that says, dude, really? Seriously, is this necessary? Did that happen?
I think that maybe in kind of a joking manner.
Okay.
Maybe not, obviously not like a rebellion type way, but
right.
I don't think anyone was surprised. At the same time, you don't really know what to expect, but you know that he's not going to be some soft coach. At the same time, you know him well enough by then to know that this is what he expects, and just like anything else that we do, you'll get used to it. And doing the things that athletes at that level do on a daily basis is not easy, and it takes some time to get used to, but eventually you do, and then they stretch you from there, and it becomes hard again, and you get used to that. So I don't think anybody was. I think he could tell that maybe that's not what we were used to after the first day or two. It was like, oh man, these. But at the same time, you get your work done, and you get a drink and rest for a second and move on. But I think that makes you a better player when you have to be able to think and process information when you're tired. And most people can't do that, especially when there's a 330-pound guy in your face right across from you. It's hard to do. So the only way to do it is to do it every day and do lots of reps of it and get to where you can do it without even thinking, really. And that's kind of his deal is every day is the same, and you should be able to get to where you can essentially do this stuff in your sleep.
No, and that you made a very good point in there that I really just want to stretch it for just a second, in that I'm getting my PhD in English, and I bring that up to say part of the job that I want and part of the reason that I like doing what I'm doing is I'm asked routinely, I'm interviewing a former athlete. Doesn't necessarily always be a football player. It's like, what questions am I to ask this person? Because I feel like there's something in there because they achieved this level of excellence, whether it be women's volleyball, which has happened, or football, which has happened, right? And I'll say, look, ask them what it's like to be in practice. If they tell you something about, we go do our work and then we go, try to pull some string there. And if they don't want to give you something, don't give them something. But you made a very good point about, hey, look, I know how to function at a very high level when I'm maybe half of what I should be. How many people walking through the door can say the same? I know what pressure feels like because, like you said, I have a 330-pound man in my face with 6 minutes left to go on the fourth. We're down by 7, and we got to go get 6. What am I going to do? Right? And I mean, those instances are real, and I know that we put them on a grander stage with television and whatnot, especially at places like Oklahoma where you play football. But that's a very good point, and one that I always try to point to when we're talking about athletes leaving college, because a lot don't actually go pro in their sport, as we know. And even at the level of football, you might have an opportunity to play a little bit in the NFL, and then you'll have to prove to somebody else that you can do a different sort of job.
Right. Yeah, and that's, obviously I think when you get in that scenario and it is the end of the game, it's the end of the Oklahoma State game in 2013, it's the end of the Sugar Bowl in 2013, and I guess it was technically 14 when that game happened, but you're sitting there and you're almost smiling. You're like, I know that you're not ready for this because I've done this every day for a year, for 4 years. I'm more prepared than you, and that gives you just a whole nother level of confidence to really put your, as they would say, step on the goose's neck here in Oklahoma and finish them off essentially. But that's what he's all about. And at the end of the day, that doesn't take away from him being a good guy. On top of that, from being a guy that cares about his players and being a guy that wants your best interest while you're there and once you're gone as well. But that's something that I'm thankful for a lot of coaches I've played for. I was blessed to have a guy like that in high school that I played for that was just hard-nosed, in your face, high expectations, and I think that made me a better player.
I just will remind people, All-State had his opportunity to go wherever he wanted to go, chose to go to Oklahoma. I mean, I looked at the stats before we got on to do this because I'm preparing for the interview, and I'm like, wait a second, 100 pancakes in 1 year? Doing what? And literally just putting people on their back. Anyway, please continue, Bronson.
Yeah, but, it's funny, you talk to people, nowadays, and it's like, well, this job's so hard, I'm here for 8 hours doing this or that, or, I'm so exhausted from my day. And it's like, really? This is nothing. This, I don't think I'll ever do something as challenging as my experience as a whole as a student athlete. Obviously physically, I can say that fairly confidently, but going through those days that are essentially 18-hour days. I mean, that's not unheard of, and I think at the time it sucked. Like, oh my goodness, I just went to bed at 1 a.m. and I'm getting up at 4:45 a.m. or whatever. But I think at the end of the day, that's a great experience to do and to have, especially when you're young. And after that, things don't seem as intimidating or scary, so to speak, moving forward. So I'm thankful for my total playing experience all the way through, kind of just instilling that mentality in me.
Very cool. I had a few questions for you before, because I was expecting this. This has gone way better than I thought it was going to go, honestly, even after you and I had talked a little bit beforehand. How do you watch the team now? Knowing what you know about it and having played, what gets you going about even reading what's written or maybe even what you hear about what's going on inside the program? How do you consume it?
I will answer that question, but I have to ask. Okay. You're not going to make people call you doctor, right?
I don't know, man. That's got a certain kind of charm to it. I don't know.
It's the worst. It's the worst.
Hey, look.
It's the worst.
Hey, look. I look. If you want to call me RJ PhD, that's fine too. No, I don't know, dude. No, honestly, like bad. I make jokes about it. I really do. But when I started my program, this channel didn't exist. You know what I mean? And this has become this is my passion. I like doing it. It's a lot of fun. It's opened a lot of doors for me that I didn't expect to be there. But I don't know. I mean, maybe. I mean, I'm sure that some folks will call me doctor just as... All right, let me put it this way. I was watching the radio station at Sports Animal, getting ready to do a segment or do an hour, right? And one of the guys that works the board, he said, "So I heard you're going to be doctor." And I said, "Yeah, more or less." He's like, "Yeah, more or less. So you're going to be like a real doctor or like a book doctor?" And I was like, "I guess I'm going to be like a book doctor." You know what I mean? Because it's not like a surgeon or any of that.
Yeah. My thing is, like, if I fall over and you can't rescue me, to me, you're not a doctor. Now, I can appreciate your dedication to the program and to doing something to achieving that level. Higher education, for me, I have a different view on it personally. But, I think, there's a school I was coaching at as a volunteer, and it's like, Mrs. whatever her name was, principal. It's like, oh no, it's Dr. this or whatever. I'm like, doctor? I'm like, yeah, she's a doctor of education. I'm like, what? How do you become a doctor of education? Like, what? And then insist and be offended when someone doesn't say doctor. It's just like come on.
Well, I mean, like, it's like attorneys, right? Attorneys could be called doctors. I mean, they're not, but it's a different sort of doctor. I think it's honestly just a personal thing. And if I referred to you as a former college football player as opposed to a former Sugar Bowl winner or even former Sooner, right? I think there's just a level to that one thing is going to ring better on your ears than another. And I understand that you might not be built that way, but there are a lot of people that are. Me personally, like, again, I'm RJ to most everybody. I think the people that are going to call me doctor really are just proud of me or just want to rib me, because I don't think I'm going to go around saying, hey Bronson, now you got to call me Dr. RJ. Like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah,
like,
as long as you're not that guy, because that person is real. I mean, I think that if my business attorney was like, you got to call me a doctor, I'd be like, all right, we're out of here.
No, not gonna happen. Well, see, that's pretentious, right? Like, that's so even my professors, right? So like I'm finishing the graduate program. I call them doctor out of respect, right? That's me extending a professional courtesy. Because I understand how difficult it is to earn that degree, period. And the title comes with the degree, whether you like it or not. They will insist on me calling them by their first names, right? And that's like me calling, I don't know, did you call Bedenbaugh Bill?
Sometimes, yeah.
Right. Cool. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's the same.
It's like the old Atticus versus Mr. Finch.
Right. Exactly. And man, now we're into To Kill a Mockingbird. See, now you're getting into my wheelhouse.
You didn't realize I was so versatile, did you?
I expect every offensive lineman to be versatile, honestly. I mean, you guys.
That's respectable.
Nah, that's I can count on linemen to know exactly what's going on and how it's going on and why it's going on in a way that I personally could never really, outside of a few. There's just skill players that just don't see the game like that. I mean, it's like you said, right? As an offensive lineman, my job is pretty much the same up and down, right? I'm either pass blocking or run blocking, and we got to work as a team, literally. You just have a different angle on the game, and you have a much better understanding of the world.
I could certainly say that there's a lot of times where I could tell you as a left guard or right guard or right tackle what all 11 guys on the offense are doing on any given play. I would bet my net worth that there's nobody else outside of the offensive line or the quarterback that could do that ever when I was in the group I was with.
Man.
I think that's the difference in kind of the understanding, because you have to understand, like, not only, like, so if I'm a receiver, I'm running a go route, I'm running a hitch route, I'm running a sluggo. That's all I got to worry about. Now I got to see if the safety's dropping or rocking, or if they're in press coverage, or they're trying to jam me, or they're in man, they're in zone. But at the offensive line, we got to see the whole picture. If I got to know that if this Y motions and they shift with him and they run with him, they're in man, or if this Y motions and the backers just shift to the right, they're in zone. I've got to know, like, all these different things that are going on, because they ultimately affect the scheme of the 5 guys working together, or 6 with the tight end or 6 with the fullback, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that there's certainly some truth to that when you're talking about guys up front. And I think that's something I always challenge young guys that I've worked with is see the big picture. You can't just say, I'm taking a step with my right foot, and then I'm going to work up to the linebacker. You've got to be able to see the whole field. And this kind of gets back to your question you're asking about, how do I watch the game? Giving a little bit of a tidbit of that now. I can't just sit back and watch the game. It's a curse, I think, at this point. I'm zoned in on the box. For example, when we watch tape, typically we watch from it as an offensive line from the end zone camera, which typically goes from the quarterback depth to the linebacker depth, and then to a man or two width outside of the tackles or tight end. So we're watching essentially the box, just to be able to see the angles and stuff better. So I definitely prefer to watch it from behind the play versus from the side, like a TV view. So sometimes ESPN will actually have that, like the Skycam view on on ESPN Go. Right. So I would much rather prefer to watch that. Also, they typically have the commentators pulled on that one, so you can't hear them saying stupid things and RPO this and RPO that and RPO and RPO and RPO. And it allows me to kind of see the play progress and see, where they're getting points of double teams, what's kind of their overall mission of the blocking scheme. That's primarily what I watch. And it's, fun when you watch football with people that aren't as well versed and you say, oh, they're about to do this, or this is about to happen, or they're going to run this play, or they're running to the right, or they're about to pitch it out to the left. And it's kind of like what people are so amazed by Tony Romo as a commentator. It's like that was his life for however many years he played, 15 years or 14 years or whatever.
Yeah, but there are a lot of quarterbacks that are in that booth that don't do that.
Right.
So now you're making me question whether or not they're any good. Because
I think he's fresh out, a year or two, but
again, if Peyton Manning takes the Monday Night Football job, right, that Jason Witten left, let's just say for the sake of argument, and he's not able to do that, does that diminish what we think of Peyton Manning? I don't think so.
He'll be able to.
Yeah, right. I'm just saying, like, I kind of want to put that into perspective just a little bit, because I get where you're going, and I want to get you back into explaining how you see the game, but I gotta just step in just for a second and say, whatever he was doing, nobody else was doing it, right. And that's really I think if you have that ability and you're hiding that from the audience, you're depriving us of not only an entertaining product, but making better fans. Like I hear ex-players always tell me, I hate the way that football is talked about. And I'm like, okay, educate people. Like, that's one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on and wanted to have some of the kids on and whatnot is, look, if there's a way that you think that we should be watching the game that we're not, tell us, because people don't want to be stupid about football any more than, you want to be stupid about football. They would love to know what you know. They're just not gonna, because they haven't had those reps and they haven't had arguably the best coaching in the world when we're talking about places like Oklahoma.
Yeah, and I think you would love to be able to speak on that level to everyone.
Right.
But the reality is, we're talking about tens of thousands of hours of film and practice and studying and just absorbing it. It's tough to really get past kind of that entry level of, this is a zone play, this is a power play, and that stuff is just second nature at this point. But it's something that I do appreciate when somebody can speak on the game with more nuance than just calling every run play that an RPO. It's like there is such thing as a play action. It's been around for a long time. He acts like he's going to hand the ball off and he just throws it. I mean, it's just this RPO is just taking over the world, and it's like, does it happen quite a bit? Sure. But it's like they act like they just discovered some kind of new law of nature. It's like, oh, the RPO, I just identified it. And they're usually wrong, because you can tell when the back is not. You can usually tell when a running back's carrying out a fake versus he actually thinks he might get the football. There's a big difference, typically, unless they're really good. But yeah, I mean, I struggle just to leisurely watch football since I've stopped playing, and I don't know if that's good or bad, but I definitely don't want to be the guy at the bar or at the restaurant or at the house clapping at the TV and yelling and all this stuff either. So I just kind of kick back and watch the game and try to kind of get a feel for what they're trying to do and what they're setting up. And I think that if you look at it as I think most people just look at it as a source of entertainment, whereas I kind of look at it as a chess game.
And that is the way to watch the game, honestly. I tell a lot of folks all the time, like for instance with the Orange Bowl, I watched it by myself. One, because I wanted to have my own opinions about what I saw, but because I am not the rah-rah guy that I think a lot of people think I am. Like, I get asked all the time, what game am I going to, or if I'm going to spring game or whatnot. And the fact of the matter is, I want to watch the football, and that makes me antisocial, right? Because I'm locked in on what's going on the screen. And even then,
Right.
like during like commercial breaks or whatever, I am thinking about what just happened. I'm writing down what just happened. I'm even to a degree diagramming in my own head and then on paper what happened, because I love the game that much in the strategy, watching it play out, and I get a kick out of being right just as much as anybody else. So like, I did know the difference between an RPO and play action, and I did know that they were going to run one to start the game against Alabama, and I made a big show out of saying that I was right. But on top of all of that, it's so much fun if you're just watching outstanding football. You know what I mean? Like, there's a big difference between watching, no shade, but 2A high school football is only good to me if I'm watching Davis or Millwood here locally. Because, like, Davis runs a wishbone in which I can't find the ball. And that's awesome to me. Like, I wait a second. You're playing Houdini with the football because you're so good at running the wishbone. And everything looks the same. And everything is awesome to watch because everything is very well executed. And that's what I'm looking for in college football. And that's one of the reasons why I watch professional football. Is because there's a great degree of, yeah, that's pure athleticism. And that dude just made a play because he's an athlete. And there's also the bit of, yo, was that something new? Like, did they just come up with something different? And that's what I see from Lincoln, right? When you watch him call plays, I'm going, your tendencies are showing, and then all of a sudden he rocks you to sleep. And that's fun. And I don't understand how to make that more fun to people.
Right. Yeah, I think the beauty of it is that people think that being an offensive genius is this huge, complex strategy and building all these new things and packaging things a certain way. I think that what they do is they actually do less, and they do it really well. They run a couple of run plays. They don't do a whole lot. And then obviously you get real fancy with the route trees and things of that nature. But if you watch them, they run zone, they run GT, and they run power, and that's about it. They don't. I mean, they run it out of different packages. They run it with, with zoom motion, whatever. But they're not doing all kinds of crazy things up front. But what they do really well. So I think that kind of goes back to the old school wishbone style offenses. They run right and they run left, and they get 6 yards of play, and they just do it every play, and you can't stop them. So I think that there's there's a lot that goes into kind of being a strategist as well as having a pulse of the game is what's actually happening and starting to pick up on the things that they're doing. And they did this on tape, but in reality, now they're out here trying to change it up. So now we should change it up and do something to counter that move. And then, there's all kinds of, your philosophy could be anything. It's, we're going to be balanced. And then Mike Leach says, well, balance isn't running past, balance is covering the field equally. So if you can pass it 90% of the time and still be balanced. And some people would say, oh, that's crazy, you're unbalanced if you pass it 90% of the time. You got to run it at least 40% of the time in today's offense to establish true balance. So who's right? I don't know. I wouldn't say Mike Leach is wrong by any means with the success that he has had offensively. But I think there's no A or B, there's no black or white. What works for you, what works for the personnel that you have, what works against the defenses you play against. What works in the Big 12? Would it work in the SEC? I don't know. Would what works in the SEC work in the Big 12? I don't know. But I know that Big 12 offenses tend to do pretty well in bowl games. Now, defensively, struggle, right? But sometimes those defenses they show a little better in bowl season because they're playing against offenses that are a little bit more simplistic or more pro style. So there's so much to football, and I think that's the beauty of it is, especially when you start getting up into the level of, top tier D1 football. You watch it, like you said, a 2A high school game. It just takes one or two guys you can win state championship with one or two players in small school, high school football. At a low level, it doesn't take a lot of strategy to be successful. If you have a couple of studs, you can give them the ball and tell guys to try to stick to somebody and make it work. But at that level, everyone's so good for the most part. There's weaknesses on every team somewhere. They find a way to exploit that, and they find a way to make their guy that's maybe not quite as good as this guy over here beat the guy that's better than him. I would say if you looked at our offensive line in 2013 when we played Alabama, on paper, if you looked at us and you looked at their front seven was obviously better. I think they all got drafted. Yeah. Which is crazy. Whether it was that year or over the next couple of years. And we're talking about first, second round. Yeah. For the most part. And then we had some good guys and some guys that went and played and for whatever reason that day we had a strategy. We bought into the strategy, we prepared, we installed a new offense, and ultimately we were able to impose our will on a team that was, by all accounts and by all media accounts, going to dominate us in every facet of the game. And that's what I love about football is, you can equalize the playing in so many different ways, whether that's physicality, strategy, game plan, personnel, preparation. The off season is a huge piece of it. Are you in better condition than the other team? There's just so many little advantages, and it kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier is people are trying to get every single advantage they can get from recruiting all the way through the ball game. And it's just a constantly keeping all those plates spinning, and how can we continue to get better in all those little areas.
Yeah, man. I feel like I could just keep talking ball with you for another 2-3 hours, especially just digging into balance and what that means and air raid. And I love this stuff, but I feel like I've had you for an hour. And I was thinking, hey, we'll go at 20 minutes. It'd be good.
Well, thankfully for you, I enjoy talking about it. Maybe not quite as much, but quite a bit as well. So I've got time to go as long as we need to go. But no, I definitely enjoy kind of talking about the more nuanced side of the game that a lot of people either don't or won't understand, or they don't care to get that deep, which is understandable because it's kind of a curse.
No, it is not. I mean, okay.
So like you said, like you don't want to go watch it at a party because you're the guy that's zoned out socially, which true. I don't care about at all. But it does become kind of a deal where you can get into it. It's like the number 23 with Jim Carrey. He just gets obsessed with it, and kind of takes him in a strange direction. But yeah, that's why I think it's the best team sport out there. It takes 11 guys to do it at a high level. and it takes an immense staff. Really, if you look at the types of staff that these college teams and pro teams are assembling to make it all happen, it's become this huge industry. But it's kind of a keeping up with the Joneses at this point. To how can we scrap and fight for that inch here and that inch there?
I mean, it has to be. I mean, I think at the top, right, it has to be, because let's take a sport that is stupidly top heavy like women's basketball, right? They're not competing with Winthrop. They're competing with UConn, Baylor, Notre Dame, Mississippi State, South Carolina. That's about it, right? And I know this because I'm watching the X's and O's of what they're doing. And you could say they out-athlete people, but if you watch a Final Four game between the women's teams, you'll see it's just a hair. It's a hair here, it's a hair there. And you're bringing up ways in which, more or less Heupel and the staff and the players outfoxed Nick Saban, Alabama. But I've also I've been studying the air raid since, I got to say, like 2005, just because I've been fascinated by, can you really throw the ball all the time? And it's like you were saying, no, we just got to get the ball to playmakers, and we got to get them in space. I mean, there was a time when Jason Morrow was the leading receiver for Texas Tech as a tight end. And it's like, no, the way that the scheme is structured, the ball finds the person who's open. All right? We're going to find a patch of grass. We're going to get the ball out of that dude, out of our quarterback's hands, because he's tiny and our offensive line is tiny. Not because we recruited that way. It's just what we got, right? And because that's what we got, we'll take a guy like Michael Crabtree and we'll throw him the ball 90 times over the course of a season. It's what we got. And I thought that offense, kind of like the wishbone, will equalize or intensify, right? In the wishbone, you see intensity in having a guy like, let's say, Charles Thompson, like Jamel Holloway, like Billy Simpson, the great running backs that come to Oklahoma. But also, you could take that to Davis and just run it well. And I think you could do the same thing with the air raid. Your quarterback does not have to have a cannon. He just has to be accurate, which is to say, did the kid come up throwing a football? There's so much about this that's fascinating to me, especially when you get into scheme, because if I think about like a pro-style offense, or what people construe as a pro-style offense, I-formation set, single back set, we're just going to go big and try to hurt people. If you're not built to do that, you're not going to be very good at it, and that gets into players, and that gets into recruiting, and that's the keep it up with the Joneses aspect of it, because I don't necessarily think you have to have great players to run a great scheme. I think you have to have great players to run a mediocre scheme. And I think in some ways, you could look at the I-formation, you could look at some other styles of playing football that are just mediocre. They don't necessarily get inventive about maximizing the talent that they have, because they never had to. You've always had a guy. You've always had a bell cow back that can carry the ball 300 times over the course of a season. And you've always had an offensive line that can dominate a defensive line. What happens if that dries up or somebody gets hurt?
Right. Yeah, you play the cards you're dealt every week, and, I think, as a guy that likes to kind of study the game, I mean, love them or hate them, you look at a team like the Patriots in New England and what they've been able to do over the last decade. They never have the most talented team on paper. And look at them this year. It's like name a receiver that they had. Like
outside of Edelman, people have a hard time. Yeah,
they had a bunch of white guys. I mean, running around and doing unders and quick routes, and they got a 40-year-old quarterback that's too old, and they got a tight end that's banged up, and they had an offensive line that was underpaid, and they lost some of the guys from the year before. And what do? They manage the game as coaches. They do their job as players, and they win championships almost every year. Right. and like I said, they've had studs come through, Teddy Bruschi's, and Tom Brady's no slouch, but is he the most physically gifted player in the NFL? Is he the most physically gifted quarterback?
Yeah, but they only had one of those guys. They only had him for like 4 games. Like, there was a time when you would say Josh Gordon was the most physically gifted receiver in the NFL, and even when he was still in the league last year, you'd be like, nah, I'd take that guy inside my first 10 opportunities as a receiver. He's just got the tools. If I can just get him on course mentally, then he'll be okay. But outside of that, I wouldn't draft any of those dudes. With Gronk and the way he was banged up, you could make an argument that maybe you wanted Zach Ertz, maybe you wanted Travis Kelce, and keep going down the line. But yeah, you make a very good point, and none of those guys are the top at what they do. I mean, outside of Brady, and even then, we're talking about is that dude throwing ducks yet? Because it looks like he's throwing ducks. You know, was there anything about his game that said, I'm throwing the ball down the field? You know, and yet Rex Burkhead is back there torching you. You know, and
Yeah.
I'm going, wait a second, who? What?
Yeah. And it's like, oh, we hate the Patriots. It's like, how can you hate what they're doing? I mean, it's something like that's really never been done at that level. I mean, you could argue that, you know, UConn women's basketball was more dominant probably, but I mean, at that level in the NFL, the most competitive league in sport, in my opinion, since they only play 16 games versus the other sports which play far too many games, in my opinion. Also, it's insane what they've been able to do, and especially in today's game, there's a lot more turnover than there used to be. There's, you know, guys get hurt, guys retire, guys get traded. You know, guys come in and help you for a year, and then they move on, and they find a way, regardless of who's there, to make it work. So that's credit to the system. That's credit to the way they prepare, and it proves that, you know, the best athletes don't always necessarily equate to the best performance on the field. And I mean, Bill Belichick's going to end up, I think, being the best NFL head coach
there's
ever.
No question. There's no question.
And I think he's a guy that did it on his terms and did it his way, and never really faltered from that. You know, there's, you know, a little scandal here and there, but who's not trying to steal signals at this point?
I think we established that earlier. You know what I mean? Just any little thing you can do.
Yeah, for sure.
Even if it's deflate the ball. Look, Bronson, can we get up after the spring game, see what you see what I see, and talk about it here?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool, dude. Cause I'm gonna have to call it here and go see my girls. Bronson Irwin, former offensive lineman, played guard, played tackle, played whatever you wanted him to play while he was at Oklahoma. Doing well in life. I've had so much fun talking with you about ball, and I hope to do this again very soon. Thanks, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man.